Good morning, all. My name is Bianca Michuda, and I am the Community Engagement Specialist for Austin Development Services. I thank you all again for joining us for the Land Development Academy. And today we have another new topic that anyone who's gone through site plan review should probably already be familiar with. We're going to learn from Andy Halm and Rosemary Avila and Carter York of Austin Energy regarding the Austin Energy site plan review process. And as you know, the Land Development Academy sessions offer a deeper look at the site plan review process from experts across the city of Austin departments who work with site plans. So today, Austin Energy is taking the stage. Um, it looks like we have a good number of participants with us today, and I want to ask for your assistance to track attendance. If you are here with a group of people, meaning one person signed on and you've got more than a single person viewing, go ahead and enter that into the chat box to let us know how many people are in your group with you participating today. So that'll help us keep track of how many people are really here. And before we get started, I want to review the engagement format for today's meeting, and also just to highlight that we do have American Sign Language interpreters with us. And so you can see on screen that they're already here interpreting, but if you are someone who is in need of that, you may choose to hover your mouse over their little video square and you can pin them. And so we do have two ASL interpreters today. You might want to pin them for yourself if that's helpful. Okay. So we have 1 hour set aside for today's program, and we are going to start with a presentation and close with a Q&A session. So questions can be posted to the Q&A bank at any time by selecting that option at the bottom of your screen, or you can wait and ask your questions live during the Q&A portion by using the raise hand function, which is also at the bottom of your screen. So if you're having any issues with any of the Zoom functions, feel free to chat one of the meeting hosts and we can help to troubleshoot any issues. And while we hope to be able to answer all of your questions, for those that we don't have the information for, we'll post a follow-up response that you'll get via email. And I would also like to note that we are recording today, so you will receive a link to the presentation and the recording via email as soon as they're ready. So with all of that housekeeping, I'll go ahead and hand the mic, so to speak, over to Andy Holm. He's going to kick us off with our presentation today.
Thank you, Bianca. Welcome, everybody. My name is Andy Holm. I'm the Program Manager for Infrastructure Services at Austin Energy. We'll go to the next slide. Yeah, we'll go to the next one. So just to kind of give an overview, go back one, please. Thank you. Just to kind of go over for our agenda for today from an Austin Energy perspective, we'll talk about our team, Austin Energy Infrastructure Services. And then we'll talk about our internal partnering teams within Austin Energy. Next things we'll go over is tools that we use on behalf of doing reviews of site plans. We will also cover completeness checks, what we look for from an AE perspective. And then also we'll talk about a little bit more in depth of Austin Energy site plan review. And then also next step for helpful tips for applicants for process and license or site plans reviews. Next slide, please. What is Austin Energy Infrastructure Services? Infrastructure Services is an internal team within Austin Energy that's kind of made up of three components. One, we have a land development team, which is specifically addresses site plan and subdivision reviews. We also have, and additionally, we have a residential review team, which handles all the PR processes. And then the third component is our project coordination team, which develops or processes and works with governmental projects or specialty type projects. But today's focus is specifically going to be in relation to site plan review. I want to introduce part of our team is land development team. Is we have myself as a program manager that oversees this wonderful team. Next, we have planning officer Rosemary Abela, she's waving there. And then the next, we have our project coordinators, Carter York and Tijing Zhao, or some people call him as TZ. We also have project assistants, Ashley Robinson and Ashley Wolf. And then last but not least, and probably the heartbeat of our team, is our intake coordinator, Diana Hidahosa. What does a infrastructure services application, what type will we review? So first we review site plans, including expedited site plan reviews. And then we also review subdivisions, including DETJ sites. And I'll explain that a little bit later. And site plan correction and exemptions. We also review license agreements and encroachment agreements. And we also review Board of Adjustment reviews. Back to the subdivision for DETJ. DETJ sites are sites which have excluded themselves from the extraterritorial jurisdictions or they de-annex from the city. So to look at that component and to give a little bit of background on that is the service territory for Austin Energy spans outside the city limits. So we incorporate a lot of areas within the county itself. And so we review those type of projects that are proposed developments in that world. I'm going to pass it on to our next slide and pass it over to Rosemary Abela.
Hey everyone. So I'm going to talk to you about the AE Energy Review Team. So when you submit a site plan, it is not just myself or Carter or one of our staff reviewing this. It is a large group at Austin Energy coming up with those comments. So every U0, all of these groups would possibly touch your site plan. So here are a few. We have network, which is the downtown area. And there's a slide later in the presentation to talk about the network group. We have chilled water, which is the district cooling system in downtown, parts of Mueller, and some domain area. We have transmission engineering and construction. They are only added when needed, and there's a slide about that to talk about it later. We have AE Systems Planning. This is the group that will tell us when a capacity study is needed. They're the experts if we can service your site, if we have enough capacity. They'll look at the circuit and the loads. They look at every U0. We have Distribution Design. This is the group that is doing your design. So the leads will look at this during U0 and they will work with us the whole time, getting the prelim design down. And then eventually they'll assign it to an AE designer. So distribution design is really involved in all aspects of the site plan review. We also have the metering team. Metering comes to our meetings and they just want to make sure those meters are labeled and that they're compliant based on location. And we'll talk about clearances and everything for that later. We have pull attachments. They attend our site plan meetings to see what projects are coming down the line because they'll get involved after design. So this is a heads up for them. And we have project coordination services. They are the group that are our easement experts. They will tell us when we need to require or request an easement. They will help us assist like what easements are existing, what needs to be proposed. And they work also with electric utility support. This group is in two different departments in real estate and financial services and in Austin Energy. And they're the ones that draft the easements and they also execute the easements. And our team actually, they go out and record it for you. So it's a little different than how other site plans easements are handled. And then I will pass it to Carter, who will talk about the tools we use.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Rosemary. When we're doing reviews for site plans, subdivisions, license agreements, most of those start with plans that are submitted by an applicant through development services and distributed to different departments for review. We've got four primary tools that we use in our review process. The first is an internal GIS-based program called Electric Office. And this is a annotated map program. It sits on top of Google Maps, and it shows the electric infrastructure of Austin Energy within our service area, and also informs us on property layout. We use Bluebeam Review to do our markup. We provide markup directly on the plans that are submitted by an applicant. So there's no question about where we're referring to something or which overhead line we might be talking about. They can open up the plans that they submitted and see markup directly on those plans with our comments included. We also inform all of our comments through our Austin Energy Design Criteria Manual. This is a public-facing document. It shows our design requirements, safety requirements, and these design criteria are approved by City Council. Every so often, whenever there's significant upgrades, those go before the council to get approved. And then we use Amanda, which is the citizen portal, the internal version of the citizen portal, where we see our task list. This includes our assigned reviews, where we submit comments, and where hopefully we provide final approval for the electric design for applicants. Next slide, please. Electric Office, as I mentioned, is an internal staff only program that we use. This screenshot shows a small portion of what we can see when we're looking at Electric Office. And this particular snippet of map shows a segment of Cameron Road, just north of the Mueller development. The gray line from bottom left to top right is Cameron Road. And you can see the other streets on there. The lighter black outline shapes are property outlines that show houses or commercial properties. So what we look at on this as an Austin Energy reviewer are the annotated lines on there. If you look to the darker blue lines, those are all overhead utility lines running up and down Cameron, and then sometimes behind properties along streets. So when you're outside, you see utility poles and you see power lines running on them. Those are our blue lines on this program. We can click on those in our active program and get a lot more information about that. It can tell us, is there one line up there? Are there 3 lines up there? Is this primary? Is this secondary? We can see where transformers are located. If there are guy wires supporting those poles out in the right of way or wherever they are, that can be annotated on there as well. And we'll see all of that. So when we look at plans, we can open up this program and see immediately what is feeding that particular property, what is around it, what resources do we have available. If you look to the left of Cameron Road and you see all of the light blue lines, those are where our utility lines dip underground. So those all represent underground electric conduit. The smaller boxes with the plus signs are pull boxes. The smaller green boxes on there all represent power transformers that are feeding particular properties out there. And again, we can click on those in our live program and determine how many phases are in those transformers. Are they, what the load is? Are they 300 kVA, 1200 kVA, etc.? So we get a really good picture of what is surrounding a property as we're doing our reviews. Next slide, please. Bluebeam Review is the annotation program that we use. We're looking at a submitted plan right now for a property, and all of the yellow on there has been annotated by a reviewer. We ask that the reviewers, when they submit their plans, show all of the existing Austin Energy infrastructure and all of the proposed infrastructure that they want to use to feed their new development or service their new development. We can cloud items, we can highlight items, we can ask them in the bottom, the darker text says to show existing overhead secondary. So when I'm looking at the previous screen on the Electric Office, I saw that maybe there was an existing line there, and I'm asking the applicant to show that line on their plans. And then the red text above that is asking them to provide clearances from their proposed structure to those lines. We'll get more into clearances here in a little bit. We can add text, we can cloud things, highlight things, color things, draw things. We provide all of our comments in their plans, though, so that when they get their comment sheet back, their comment report from Austin Energy, they get a link and they can download the plan set with all of these annotations in there, with us pointing out exactly what we're talking about, asking for, or needing clarification on. Next slide, please. Our criteria manual is a public-facing document. It's available on the Austin Energy website, and this informs almost all of our comments that we provide to applicants. It's over 150 pages of criteria, both in narrative and in visual form. And a couple of things that I pulled to show you are, we've got a figure on the left for working clearances from overhead lines for unqualified persons. These are OSHA working clearances. And it'll show the pole. It will, on the left, it will show the 3 conductors at the top, and then the circles represent radio clearances from those conductors that need to be observed, and to provide safety from those for anyone working out there. The right is a meter loop for a underground installation for residential or commercial. And this can be provided to the applicant, and it can also inform us when we're providing comments back to the applicant about meters. But the criteria manual has clearances, it has point of service information, it has service drop information, all sorts of things related to providing electric utility to properties within the Austin Energy service area. Next slide, please. And our last primary tool is our Amanda system. That is the internal facing citizen portal. When applicants provide plans and submit applications to development services, those go through an intake process. Those go through a completeness check process, and those ultimately end up in a reviewer's task list. This is a snippet from my task list a few months ago. The folder type indicates SP for site plan review. The LM are license agreements that I'm reviewing, and anything starting with a C is a subdivision or a plat review. And it'll have a reference file number, it will have a folder name, and when I open those up, I'll have access to all of the documents that are uploaded, the attachments that are uploaded by the applicant, including plans, updates, engineer summary letters, all of the things from the applicant that I will download and start to do my review with. And ultimately, this is where we will provide our comments, either rejection, informal update, or hopefully approved. That's our ultimate goal, is to get every plan approved and pushed through for development. Next slide, please. We have some lesser used tools that are in our toolbox, but nonetheless, we do rely on these from time to time. Property Profile is another public-facing City of Austin website. And at times that we will use that to help identify review cases. You can set the different layers within Property Profile to show different information, some of which is useful to us are review cases. So if we set that layer, we can take a look at all of the site plan cases in a particular area that might be around other development that we're reviewing that can help us talk about capacity or load or other service line extensions that we're already planning that can help us. There's also easement information, and we'll talk about easements here in just a little bit in our presentation. We use Appendix F of the City of Austin Environmental Criteria Manual. And this is Appendix F is descriptive categories of tree species. And we use that to identify utility compatible tree species. We have specific code that dictates clearances that are allowed for utility compatible tree species. It's not a super long list of tree species, but it includes trees like mountain laurel, persimmon, Texas redbud. Height matters, certain height requirements for trees that can't be too close to our lines, etc. So we will look into that when we get to the proposed landscaping sheets in a plan set to see what kinds of trees might be proposed around our infrastructure. And we also use Austin Energy locates. When we were looking at electric office earlier and we saw those dark blue lines and the light blue lines, the GIS is not exact. It gives us a general reference to where those lines are, but it might vary by a few inches or even a few feet out in the field. And in some cases, when an applicant is proposing to do some trenching, maybe to lay down some new fiber optic cable or new wastewater work, drainage, things like that, or bore pits, we will have them use Austin Energy locates, where one of our team members will go out into the field and using detection instruments, they'll be able to mark specifically where our underground infrastructure is running so that they can remain clear of that and maintain safety clearances when they're doing any sort of below grade work. Next slide, please. Thank you.
All right, so now that we know the tools we use, let's go to completeness check. Um, Austin Energy is part of the site plan completeness check process. That was a change that happened last year. All of our requirements are in all the application packets. Um, Missing plans is the primary rejection reason, so just make sure you submit your plans and you'll more than likely pass site plan completeness check for Austin Energy. During completeness check, we'll verify if your project is within the Austin Energy service area, or if we can be no review required and not be part of the formal submittal. And we'll also verify if there's any transmission lines. Um, if there is, then we'll still be part of the project. Next slide. So our typical comments for completeness check is show existing infrastructure and easements. If we know that there's existing infrastructure, you're going to get this comment. Just show everything early in the process. Easements, we can quickly look at a plat and tell if there's easements or not without doing too much research. And then the most common comment is add our 5 standard Austin Energy notes. These are all in the application packets as well. So you can just copy paste them. Here's the first 2. I'm not going to read them, but most of y'all are aware of these standard notes. You can go to the next slide. And this is the continuation. And here I just want to highlight note number 5 tends to almost always be missed. So if you remember note number 5, kudos to you. If not, please remember that is probably a top rejection item, just because I think there's a page break in the application packet, so it's often missed. Next slide. All right, so let's talk about our review and what we're looking for. So site plan review, everybody wants to know what are we looking for and what sheets do we need to look at. Here's a list of the sheets that we do look at, and I can go into some explanation of why. But all these sheets, we do need to see the Austin Energy prelim design, and we need to see our electric easements being shown on these sheets if they're existing. So people ask, why can't I just show this all on one AE page? For site plan sheets, they often show the canopies, the balconies, bike racks, building overhangs, ponds, and sidewalks. Those are all things we need to review for clearances and to make sure they're not in our easements. So that's why it's really important to show our stuff on the site plan sheet. For ENS sheet, we want to review where your washout and spoils areas are. We want to make sure that that is not happening in an electric easement, but also not happening too close to our lines. And we understand these are temporary items, but we want them out of our area and away from our lines for safety purposes. Utility sheets, we need to see everything wet and dry. That includes water, wastewater, gas, everything. And we need to see this because we want to make sure that we're 5 feet away from everything. And Carter will go into clearances later, but that's why we need to see wet and dry utility. For grading sheets, we want to look at these because we want to make sure there's not significant grading under our transformers or our poles. Um, Again, keep everything flat under all AE infrastructure. On the landscape sheets, we do review trees, as Carter just mentioned, and we'll talk about trees later, but we do review all types of trees, what kind, what height, and how far they are from our infrastructure. And on architectural elevation sheets, we're looking for those niches over transformers. We want to catch those because those do require an easement and there are requirements for that. And we want to make sure that there's no garages under transformers. So we do review for our items when there's architectural and elevation sheets provided. All right, next slide. All right, so here's the big question. What is a prelim design? Also preliminary design. So AE does require that you show preliminary design and site plan. We know that this won't actually be designed until after site plan approval usually, but we do want a prelim design shown. We want it proposed, and the earlier in the process, the better. That way we can start making comments about it. So things included in a preliminary design include a transformer pad. We want to know where they're going to be located. If you show us a 5x5 or a 10x10 based on um, your load. So 5x5 would be single phase, a 10x10 would be three phase. So make sure you're showing that scaled out because we will measure from the transformer pad to buildings to ponds to everything. And we will prefer and like you to show your 5 foot radial clearance around that. So every transformer will have a easement post site plan on that transformer path. So we want to make sure nothing is near those. Um, Desired point of service, we just like that to be called out. During the site plan review, our AE design lead will verify, can we service you from here? Yes or no. You may see a pole and say, oh, I can get service from here. And we're like, nope, it's to capacity. You need to install a new pole. You need to connect to a different pole. So that's why we want it shown early on so we can start making those determinations. We want every proposed electrical routing underground shown. And again, that's to measure clearances, make sure you're not going under a pond or under a building or under a huge retaining wall or something like that. So we do need the routing shown and make sure that we maintain distances from that. We need all building meter locations shown, and that's for us to look at to verify that you're meeting line of sight. Line of sight is basically I'm standing at the disconnect and another person standing at the meter. Are they within 150 feet of each other? And can they see each other? This is for safety. They need to be able to talk to each other. Think two people out in the field. Um, that's the best way to describe meters. Um, and one important part that we have to review for is truck access. We need to know that our trucks can install the transformers and there's not anything obstructing that area. We need to know that we need to park a truck. And in here it gives the dimensions of that. And also we'll need truck access for our poles. So we want to make sure that nothing is blocking access to our poles. That will stop us from maintaining everything. So that is our basics of the prelim design. And to the left, those are the sections of code that you can find all of these items. So I'll pass it back to Carter for clearances.
Thank you, Rosemary. One of the main things that we review for proposed development, especially new buildings, anything above grade and below grade, are clearances. This is all outlined in our criteria manual. UCM 1.10.3 talks about clearances. And for overhead distribution lines, permanent structures have to maintain clearances that are required in the National Electric Safety Code, as well as the Austin Energy Design Criteria Manual. And as we saw earlier, maintain OSHA clearances for safe working conditions. Nothing can be installed over or under our overhead distribution facilities. Let's look at the image on the right. This is showing one of our utility poles in the middle. It has 3 conductors represented by the 3 small nodes at the top. That arm stretching across, supporting those exterior gnomes, is 8 feet wide in a standard setting. And so our clearances are measured from the furthest conductor. And in this case, with 3 conductors, it's the outside conductor on either side. We have 2 clearances that we're looking at. One is a horizontal clearance, and that is 7 feet 6 inches laterally from the furthest conductor. That's represented by the green polka dot columns just to the outside of that pole arm at the top. And that goes ground to sky. Everything must be outside of that green polka dot area. We also measure for radial clearances from our conductors. It's a 15-foot radial clearance from a primary conductor. That's represented by the circles with the slashes. And that radius begins at the furthest conductor on the outside of that arm and extends 15 feet in all directions from that conductor, like a big circle around the conductor. As you can see, the green house on the bottom left of that image is clear of both our horizontal 7.5-foot clearance, as well as the 15-foot radial clearance from our primary conductor at the top, and 15 feet from the neutral conductor, which is on the pole but below the main arm at the top. So we will ask for those clearances for any proposed structures to be outside of those. And we can cite our Austin Energy Criteria Manual sections specifically and provide this document, this image, to applicants to help them better understand our overhead clearances. Next slide, please. Our underground clearances include distribution lines and our pad-mounted equipment. Rosemary touched briefly in our prelim design what we ask for. We need 5 feet minimum clearance from all of our underground lines and underground equipment. And since our transformers and other pad-mounted equipment like switch gears are connected to underground conduit, they require a minimum of 5 feet clearance around those equipment pads. It's not from the piece of equipment on the pad, it's from the furthest extent of the pad itself. And 5 feet clearance is required from pull boxes and manholes as well. The top right image shows a transformer that's highlighted with the yellow T on the far right side of the image. The dotted black line around that transformer is showing the 5-foot clearance halo that needs to be clear. As you follow the highlighted lines from that transformer, represented by the line with UE for underground electric, we need 5 feet of clearance on each side of that line for a total of 10 feet clearance that covers both sides of all of that underground conduit. On the top right image again, the circle to the left of our transformer with EM, that's one of our manholes, and that will require 5 feet clearance around that as well, as do all pull boxes and conduit. That is a very common comment that we will make. No permanent structures can be within 5 feet. That includes buildings, retaining walls. That includes permanent carport structures in parking lots. And in multifamily developments, a lot of the Austin energy infrastructure will run through parking lots and drivable surfaces. And so we make that comment quite frequently as well, where carports will be suspended over or too close to our transformer pads or underground conduit. Our criteria manual references for these clearances are at the bottom. And again, all of these are found in section 1.10, which is the clearances. Next slide, please. Our transformers, these are for distribution transformers that are not within the network area. And we'll talk about network area momentarily. There is a vertical clearance around our transformers that no covering, building, or any other structure can be over the top of a transformer. Our transformers also must be located on customer property and not in the public right-of-way. They must be located 4 to 6 feet from a drivable surface. If they are closer than 4 feet, safety bollards are required to keep cars or vehicles from bumping into them. And they also need to allow for the opening of the equipment doors. One side of the transformer has doors that we use to access the internal happenings in there. Rosemary mentioned the Austin Energy truck access that needs to be able to pull the truck up, put its outriggers down, and use a crane to lift the transformer off of the truck and onto the pad. Trees must be 10 feet away from our transformers and not blocking the doors. And let's look at the image on the right. There are different clearances that are required around transformers. On the top, the plan view, so we're looking at a transformer from above. We see the transformer pad. The long line across the top is a wall, and we see fire escape stairs to the right. If this wall is constructed of brick or masonry, the minimum clearance to that wall from the transformer pad is 5 feet. If it is not made of brick or masonry, then it is a minimum clearance of 12 feet to that pad. In the bottom of that image, the elevation view, now we're standing out in front of the transformer, looking at it in front of the wall. The lateral clearances required for windows and doors are 5 feet minimum to the sides. Any sort of window, ventilating duct, or opening that is directly above the transformer needs a minimum of 12 feet clearance before that can begin or be present in a wall, regardless of the material constructing the wall. The landing of a fire escape, lateral clearance is a minimum of 20 feet. So in an emergency, let's say, unfortunately, something is going on with the transformer and it's on fire, or it's shorting or arcing, we need at least 20 feet before occupants of a building hit a landing from a fire escape to get out safely. Next slide, please.
All right, so everything Carter talked about with transformer clearances does not apply to network area. So the network area is a niched area in downtown. If you see to the right, the boundaries kind of wiggle around downtown area. If you need verification, if you're in the network area, you can always message somebody on our team and we can verify if you're within network. In this area, the transformers are actually housed internally within a vault room or a niche easement. That's very, very specific height and width for that area. And if you're in the network area, we highly suggest coordination with a network lead designer is needed as soon as possible to avoid site plan permitting delays. So if you are a network, reach out to us. We do have a designated reviewer, TZ. He reviews all of the network area site plans. Next slide. All right, transmission review. So transmission review is another team in Austin Energy, and we coordinate reviews for them. If you are in transmission review, the biggest thing to remember is transmission lines do not have defined clearances. They are reviewed on a case-by-case basis, and transmission and distribution are very different and reviewed by different teams. So if you look at the picture, the first picture on the left is a distribution line. That's like your wooden pole out there, much shorter. Transmission are the very, very tall, steel casing, huge structures. And the last picture to the right is transmission with distribution at the bottom. If you can see, there's a three-phase pole at the bottom of the transmission line. So when is transmission triggered? For any site that's within 100 feet of a transmission line, you will have to be under transmission review. Anytime transmission review is required, we require CAD files for that. So instantly, if you know that you're near a transmission line, send your reviewer CAD files before we reject you. If we reject you for anything transmission related, we're going to ask for CAD files every round of review. That way we can send that to transmission engineering and transmission construction. So the main difference between the two is the voltage. Distribution provides your electric service. Transmission is the connection from substations. And they're usually the difference is that transmission lines have the higher voltage. And so we want to make sure that the clearance is not just a standard 15 feet. Sometimes it could be 25. Sometimes we get up to a 50-foot easement or even a 100-foot easement based on the transmission line. The clearance calculations, they take into account the maximum sag, the blowout conditions, to make sure that they have safe clearances underneath those lines. So they are looking at the insulator swing and structure deflection. So it gets very technical. And if you're in a transmission line area with an LCRA structure, then our staff will just say provide proof that LCRA has looked at it and that they're okay with it. And our transmission review would not be involved. Next slide. Trees. So why do we need to look at your landscape sheet? Here we're actually looking for clearances from lines, underground, overhead, our poles, our transformers, and we verify that there aren't trees within our electric easements. So we use the Environmental Criteria Manual, Appendix F, to determine what a utility compatible tree is. It's a simple chart that has X's saying utility compatible, yes or no. We're using that. And we're also using the mature height category because some trees can be utility compatible or not. And then mature height over 40 feet is a trigger. So to the right, is a little snippet of the UCM, and this is a very helpful chart that we keep handy. Basically, whenever we're reviewing, we'll look at it and we're like, okay, there's an overhead line, like the first line shows. Overhead line, are you less than 15 feet from the tree and the line? You have to be utility compatible. So it's an easy chart you could just follow. If you look down where it says poles, so no tree can be within 10 feet. And if you're greater than 10 feet, there are other conditions we might ask about, tree trimming and um, stuff like that. But it's an easy chart to follow. Um, so you use this with your ECM, and that's what we're looking for. All right, next slide.
All right, let's talk about easements. Those are required or requested during the site plan review and subdivision review process. But first, what is an easement? The City of Austin defines an easement as a legal right that allows someone other than the property owner to use a portion of that property for a specific purpose. So it gives the city, a utility provider, or another authorized party the right to access and use part of that property for things like utility lines, drainage, access, or maintenance. So the property owner still owns the land, but their use of that portion of the land is limited by the easement's purpose. So when we're looking at subdivision reviews, where an applicant is proposing like a new neighborhood, and we don't have any infrastructure out there to serve that neighborhood, we'll require certain easements for either our overhead or underground infrastructure or any other Austin Energy infrastructure or access that we will need. And that easement is allows us to get onto that property to access and maintain all of our infrastructure to serve either the property or the subdivision. If we request an easement to cover facilities or request an easement for system needs, then a meets and bounds and a closure report are submitted to the Austin Energy Reviewer by the applicant, and that will start the easement process. And then our electric utility support staff will create the easement and record that document. The easements will be obtained to cover all of our new Austin Energy facilities being installed in a site during the design process. This is done after site plan approval by Austin Energy and is handled with the Austin Energy designer. So once the site plan gets approved, then it hands off to the design team where they're actually designing and laying out all of that infrastructure and handling the easements. Next slide, please. And what can be in an Austin Energy electric easement other than our Austin Energy infrastructure? No structures, improvements, or other utilities should be in an electric easement. Other utilities can cross our easement perpendicularly, but not run parallel through one of our easements. So no buildings or any other improvements can be within that easement. A license agreement is required for any private items that may be in the easement, but these are still subject to our clearance requirements and get reviewed under a license agreement that's filed with Austin Transportation Public Works. So bike racks, benches, some landscaping, things like that can be licensed. Those are maintained by the property owner, even though they're within the easement. And so that gives the property owner the right to maintain, let's say, like I mentioned, bike racks or benches within that easement, but it is up to them to keep those maintained. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, sorry. I had mentioned that the utilities can cross our easement but not run parallel. And at times, the reviewer within the Austin Energy Review Team will require a title commitment or an ALTA survey. And that provides more information about easements that were created by separate instrument and not put into place during the plat process or subdivision review process. And we require clearly shown and labeled any electric easements on our site plan sheets, on grading sheets, landscape sheets, and any sheets related to utilities so that we can maintain proper clearances and any access that we need to those easements. Next slide, please.
All right, we're getting to the end of this. Some helpful hints. One, provide a proposed prelim design at U0 or U1. The earlier you start the process, the earlier we can actually make real comments about what you're proposing. So do it as early as possible. A prelim consult meeting, um, you'll see your reviewer make this comment at U0, contact the lead or contact the reviewer to schedule that meeting. Do this again, sooner the better, because our design leads want to get involved, systems planning, the AE reviewer, metering, all of these people want to talk to you, the sooner the better. That way we can get over any deal breaker comments early in the process. If you delay this meeting to U4, U5, U6, then it might affect the whole layout and other disciplines. So it could end up a design and layout change. So start this process early. Next helpful hint is if transmission lines are within 100 feet of your site, send us CAD files as soon as possible. These CAD reviews take longer. Sometimes it's a 2 to 4 week delay. So if you know that you're going to have transmission review, start the process early. And CAD files can be directly emailed to the reviewer and out of cycle. So we will take that out of cycle and coordinate that review. Most helpful hint is communication with your MEP, your civil, your landscape architect. All of that is key. All the sheets need to reflect that AE prelim design. So talking to everybody and having everybody on the same page. Sometimes it happens where the MEP reaches out to AE, but they haven't shown anything on the civil plans yet. So communication is key. And if we comment about a capacity study, please submit your ESPA as soon as possible. Those do take a long time. There is a long queue. So if we even mention the word capacity study, start that process very early on. Next slide. All right, so what happens when you're AE approved for site plan? Once you are, then if you haven't done so already, file your ESPA. A lot of people think that if you're AE approved, then you can go straight into design. It does not go straight into design. You have to file the ESPA, and then the lead will assign it to a designer. So it does not happen automatically. And during AE design, they will want to make sure that it matches the site plan. So if it doesn't match the site plan and you're in design, then you will have to do a correction to go update your site plan if needed. So both things have to actually like match correctly everywhere. So, and then there's the link for the ESPA application. All right, next slide. And that's everything I have. Thank you.
Thank you to our subject matter experts. Really appreciate you. Wonderful presentation. Now we're going to open up the floor for question and answer. So as I mentioned at the beginning, there are two ways that you can ask questions. So one option is to post your question in the Q&A bay by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. and I will read your question, and then one of our subject matter experts can answer. Let's see. Otherwise, you can raise your hand, and I'll let you know when it's your turn to ask your question. So, I was a little distracted there looking. We do have some questions that were answered in the Q&A box. So, if you weren't aware, you are able to look at all of those questions and read the answers. And any questions that we don't get to, we'll make sure that we send out the responses after the webinar. So we're a bit short on time, but I do see I have one question just came in from Jessica Powers. It says, will the ESPA be needed for new subdivisions or only if there is current infrastructure? Is there anyone, do any of our subject matter experts feel comfortable giving a response to that one?
Yeah, Bianca, I'll answer that one. So, Jessica, just to clarify, you're asking if an ESPA is needed for new subdivision or for their current infrastructure. Just clarification standpoint is typically for a new subdivisions, it will be contingent upon what you're proposing, or if there's existing infrastructure, we may require an ESPA. So I don't know if that answers your question.
And feel free to raise your hand, Jessica, if you wanted to add to that. I see we've got a thank you, so I think that means that she feels like that was a satisfactory answer. Thank you. All right. I've got another question that just came in through the Q&A box. Let's see. For projects that are in the city of Bee Cave, they require Austin Energy approval for the proposed project or application. How does one submit a plat or site plan to Austin Energy in that scenario?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and so that's one that we're working on with other municipalities where we have service territories overlap them. Currently, right now, the process is to work directly with us to reach out to us for a review. We'll work with typically our Southwest lead designer in review. We are trying to currently in the future try to work more directly with those municipalities to get a more defined process to work with them. That has not been established at the time. So currently, right now, the process would be is if you got a project in Bee Caves or Westlake or the Hills Lakeway, um, you know, Rolling Wood and stuff like that, you can reach out to us directly. We can work hand in hand with y'all on those types of projects.
Sounds good. Thank you. See, I'm going to see if anyone's got their hand raised. I don't see any hands up. Questions? I think we're okay to start wrapping up since we are a bit over time. We really appreciate everyone's participation today. And I'd like to invite you to take our post-engagement survey. The slide has our QR code up so that you can let us know what did you think about today's program? Is there anything we could change? Or are we just amazing? And I also want to remind you that we've got a lot of sessions lined up for the summer. You can visit our Land Development Academy webpage to register for upcoming sessions. And our next session is going to be on July 8th, where we'll be talking about on-site sewage facilities. And what else do I have for you? Just want to let you know that you'll all get a link for our meeting materials via email, including any responses to any unanswered questions. And if there's any additional questions that come up that you didn't have the opportunity to ask, you can always email us at dsdcommunications@AustinTexas.gov, and we'll be happy to get you the information that you need. So thank you all so much. And do Andy, Rosemary, Carter, any closing words for our audience?
Thank you for attending.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thanks
attending.
everyone for attending.
Thank you. And a special thank you to our interpreters today as well. Really appreciate you being here to help us communicate all this information. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you at the next session.